Ablat Gemara. We are up to Daf Kuf Ches Amid Aleph, and we're learning the last thing about miyun is that there's no particular language that you have to say, even if it's just by inference. It's good enough. I mean, if you just say, "I can't stand this anymore," and even though she's on the way to the wedding party, it's considered a miyun. Okay, so we are up to now the two dots. Okay, in the Mishnah we learned that when we say that a girl can be mamayin, it's only when she's married midrabanan, which is either through her siblings or through her mother, and she has to be aware and accepting. If they marry her off without her knowledge, without her acceptance, it's meaningless. She has to be aware, she has to be accepted. Came along Reb Chanina ben Atikna and said she has to also be mature, that she has to be able to protect her kedushin. But if she's under that age, then you don't even need miyun because it's not considered married. Then Rabbi Lezer came along, and Rabbi Lezer said that even though her siblings married her off, she's not really a wife in any sense of the word. Use the expression "ein ma'asek tana klum." It's only considered like someone that she was seduced. It means she needs a miyun. But other than that, all the entitlements that come with a marriage doesn't exist. If her husband's a kohen, she cannot eat truma. If she's a bas kohen and he's a Yisrael, she can continue eating truma, and so on and so forth. And then we have Elazar ben Yaakov, which we'll come back to later. So the Gemara says, Reb Chanina ben Atikna says Rabbi Yehuda name Shmuel, halacha is like Chanina ben Atikna. He says the name Shmuel, halacha like Chanina ben Atikna. I want that she has to be mature to a certain sense. I told you last time there's a big argument what level of maturity, because the Gemara Metzia has 3 different levels of maturity. And some say it's the first level, really young, Pu'utas, 6, 7 years old, some say a little bit older. Tana we learned. Tana Shleimina. If a Tana, let's say interesting, if a Tana came along and did not do miyun, but instead her actions decry that she wants to get out of it. For example, she stood up and she married somebody else. She went ahead and married somebody else. Now, what's he really saying? I don't want to remain married with a person that I'm married to. Even Rabbi Yehuda came along and said that that in itself, even though she never even said what we said before, I don't want to live with this guy, but her actions speak louder than words. The fact that she accepted the marriage and decided to get married to somebody else, that's the greatest meaning you can have. Now we have a number of questions to understand, to tease out what exactly Rabbi Yehuda holds. What about Niskat Shemau? What happens if she did not get married to a new person, she just got engaged? Do we say acceptance of engagement is also a sign that she's unhappy with her current husband, and that's mean or not? Toshma Kamani Tana Shleimina, it says in the Braisa of Tana that did not mean, but on the Niskacha, all she did was she got up and she got engaged. Is Mishum said, the name of the said, Kedushin also is a form of me and saying, I'm no longer happy where I am, and therefore she accepted you to somebody else. Now we have a number of questions. First of all, is there an argument? Is this opinion unanimous, or the rabbis disagree? Number one. Number two, if you want to say they're arguing, in which case are they arguing? The Kedushin, are they arguing only if we should accept a Kedushin, and they'll say, well, that's not enough yet. That's not sufficient proof that it's miyun. Maybe she doesn't understand you can't. Or I feel or they're arguing, even if she married somebody else, doesn't necessarily mean she's unhappy in her current state. It's not considered miyun. In other words, they hold an indirect miyun is not good enough. You actually have to say the words. And the question is Nusuyin, which is literally living with somebody else, tantamount to saying the words, or even that's not enough. You have to say the words, I want to be with I don't want to be with my husband anymore. They're arguing. If you want to say they're arguing in every instance, who's halach like, is like we say or not. And even when said like we say, in which case, Nusuyin, I feel a big Kedushin is limited only when she married somebody else. That or even when she got engaged to somebody else, it's good enough because it's as if she said, I don't live with my current husband. Yehuda say that. Yehuda said name Shmuel. The halacha is like a Yehuda say that, which clearly tells us that somebody's arguing. Halacha we call the plea, they're arguing, but nevertheless it doesn't resolve some of the other questions they had. How far are they arguing? And another question as well. What about her first husband? Until now we're discussing what act did she do with the second husband. What about the first husband? Are we talking about even if she was married to the first husband or merely engaged? Engagement is a much more tenuous relationship. Is it only when she's engaged to the first husband and then she doesn't act like this is sufficient? But if she was married to the first husband, she has to physically say, I don't want to live with him anymore. Or even if she's married to the first husband, her actions are tantamount to her saying, making a declaration, I don't live with him anymore. And the first husband, was she married to, or just engaged? Tashma coming here. The cows say the Avdon. Remember, we learned before that Avdon was very disparaging of Rav Shmuel ben Yossi when he came late to class, or when he was standing up and walking over everybody's heads, and he said basically, who do you think you are that you can walk over everybody's heads? And as a result of that, we said that he got a tzaras, and that two of his children drowned, and that two of his daughters-in-law walked out. So this is probably that story. The cows say the Avdon, the daughters-in-law of Avdon, they were young girls. They rebelled against the husbands. They rebelled against the husband. So a Rebbe sent a pair of rabbis to check out, do they really want to leave the husbands or not, or do they, they want to return back to husbands? So these two daughters-in-law were there. A few other women sitting talking to them. They said to them, they said to these women, "Oh, your husbands are coming." They didn't realize from far, it was dark, maybe they couldn't tell who they were, and they thought that these two Talmidei Chachamim were actually their husbands. So they said to the women, "Oh, your husbands are coming." Because they said back, "Oh, you like them? You can have them." This is a great meaning. Even though they didn't say we don't want to be with our husband, they not only didn't get married to these new people, they didn't engage. They just said we'd be happy to get married, and that's enough. Says Rebbe to be a mean. My love, the having a sibah, probably they were married to Avdon's children, and yet this is good enough. So we see clearly that an inference is enough. Anyway, that's no proof. They were engaged. Actually, there's another gears by the other Rishonim. Their gears is the other way around. These two, they recognize these two Talmidei Chachamim, and they said to these men, "Wow, here are two eligible bachelors, two of them. We wish you can have them." And these two daughters-in-law of Avdon said, "Oh, we wish that we could marry such great Talmidei Chachamim." And that was the tantamount to saying we don't want to be married anymore to our current husbands. The halacha say that you don't have to directly say it. Inference is enough. I feel the business to come. Even though they were married to the first guy, it's still enough. Okay. Then the Mishnah said, Rabbi Elazar said that even though that the girl she needs miyun to get out of her marriage, but technically they're not really married. The entitlements are not there. They're not there. And we'll see the like it. I went and looked all different angles. I couldn't find anyone who basically treats that all the outcomes of this young girl are exactly the same, as we'll see in a minute what that means. Rabbi Elazar, two opinions here. Rabbi Elazar says she's not married. Even though they're living together, they're not married. It's only like a seduced woman. It's as if they're taking a stroll together in the courtyard. But if she's a bas kohen, she can get up from his lap. But Tevelas goes to the mikveh. But chelas with truma letter, she can eat truma. She's married now to a Yisro. It doesn't matter. It's as if she's not married. She's still a bas kohen, so she can live with the guy and then afterwards go home and eat truma again. And so therefore everything is exactly the same. Time we learned Rabbi Elazar says, and that's why we think the Mishnah also is Rabbi Elazar, that it's not considered a marriage if the only time it's in a marriage is if the father married her off. Then how tight she's married. But the siblings or the mother, we're told yesterday, if the father, after he married her off, got divorced, the father doesn't have the right, at least with the Rabbanon, to marry her off. They ain't Bala Zakeh, but the husband has no entitlements. Like B'tiyasa, not whatever she finds, like Ma'aseh, not her earnings, like Ba'fon cannot annul her vows, the ain't Yodesh, if she dies, he does not inherit her, the ain't Metamala, if he's a kohen, does not go ahead Metamit her. Klolo Shadavar, the rule is, ain't Ishta L'chol Davar, they're not considered a husband and wife. The only thing is they need miyun. That's it. Otherwise, in every respect, they're not husband and wife legally. Rabbi Shua says, no, they're totally married. By the Zaka Mitziyos is the title of Mitziyah, Ubmaisiyadeh, in her handiwork of Hafar of the Derek, he don't know her vows, the Yosha, he inherits her, Metamala, and he can go to the basic chorus. We learned very interesting why the Chayda Mahatayah, they're not married, and he's a Kohen. How in the world can he go to the basic chorus? So we said that the reason is, since she's everything that she owns is going to pass on to her husband, her family is so upset with her, they have no interest in they sort of disinherit her. So she's a meis mitzvah. She has no one else to take care of her. So the kohen is allowed to defile himself when it comes to a meis mitzvah. The rule is Bishua says it's totally considered married. The only leniency here is a leniency. Instead of a divorce, miyun is enough. Rebbe says, Rebbe needs Rabbi Lezer, sure, I like better the word Rabbi Lezer than Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Lezer equates all the laws of Aktana the same. Not married, therefore, all these consequences. Rabbi Yeshua makes, Rabbi Yeshua, however, has distinctions. What do you mean, what distinction? So Gemara says, because Rabbi Yeshua treats it like a wife. What's the rule by a wife? A wife, you need a divorce. And over here, he says, a divorce, you don't need me, is enough. Sort of, it's a half pregnant, half wife, half not wife. Therefore, I don't like Rabbi Yeshua's words. Boy, you need a divorce. Someone asks back, Rabbi Lezer says they're not husband and wife, and yet he says you need miyun. So what's the difference? People who are not husband and wife, strangers, they don't need anything, and this woman suddenly needs miyun. So it's also not smooth sailing. It's not like just one law fits all. Ilav ishtei miyun nami like to boy. I take from where I was back. No, that's not a problem. It's not his wife, and if nothing needed. But because the fact is they live together intimately, you want just to walk out in the street, that makes the whole structure of marriage, institution of marriage, very weak. So therefore, we ask me, if a person is considered a wife, and then you say you don't need a divorce, that is a distinction, a very strong distinction, and therefore I don't like what Rabbi Yeshua says. Now, Blazer ben Yaakov says that if what's holding him back, what's holding her back is because of the husband, then she's a wife. If what's holding her back is not the husband, then she's not a wife. What in the world does that mean? So we're going to have two opinions. Hey, what do you mean the husband holds back? The husband does not hold back. I'm going to be much more. Let's say somebody comes over and says, I want to marry you. After she's already married to somebody as a youngster, and someone else comes along and says, I want to marry you. But she says, look, I can't. I'm already living with another man. Zui Akova, we're about 9 lines at the bottom of the page, where Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov said that regarding of Tana, if what she says was holding her back is her husband, then she's considered a married woman. She's not a mean. But if she says was holding back is myself, or some other reason, then it's as if she made me, as if she said, "I'm not interested in staying on prolonging this marriage," and she is free. So what exactly does that mean? The Gemara explains. So the two dots. What do you mean held back by the husband and not held back by the husband? So we'll have two opinions. Somebody came along and said to her, I know you're married to that guy, but I would like to marry you. But she said, look, I can't. I can't. I'm already married. I'm already connected to this person. I mean, what's holding her back? Her husband, as if she's saying, I'm happy where I am. Leave me be. But if she said, look, I can't marry you because you're not a good person. And what's she really saying? The fact that I'm living with this man here, that doesn't hold me back. It's you that's holding me back. Your new proposal. That's a kind of a mean. That means it's not covered. Does not come the person, not because my husband hold me back, and therefore that in itself is tantamount to a mean. The fact that she's ready to get married to somebody else. The only problem is you. This new proposal is not valid. It's not a good one. So then that's considered a mean. So the Gemara, they have another explanation. They will say, "Nosan lo get." If the husband gave her a divorce, that means she really wants to stay on. The only reason why she's divorced is because the husband gave her a divorce. That means that the husband is holding back. So therefore, what does that mean? So that means that now that divorce is the only reason why she's separated from that person because of divorce, the midrabanan, she can no longer, it's like a divorced woman, which means she can no longer marry, she cannot marry any of his relatives, and he cannot marry any of her relatives. And she cannot marry a kohen because the get is effective. But who also be he also be they're both also each other relatives because she wants to stay married, and the get is what keeps them apart. So they treat her like a divorcee, and therefore she cannot marry a kohen and all that. But me and a boy, if she says, I'm not interested in staying married to the person, that means as if they were never married in the first place. So now she's allowed to go marry a kohen now. She can live with his relatives. He can live with her relatives. That means that she walked out of this relationship, not he. Each other are permitted with each other's relatives. And she's not disqualified for marrying a kohen. Hoktoni lekamon, says the Gemara. The next Mishnah clearly it says, if you're Mamayin, how can you tell me that's pshat in Abelaz ben Yaakov when the very next Mishnah, which we're about to learn, says exactly that? So it seems to be repetitive. It says right in the next Mishnah, if the woman says, I'm walking out of this marriage, because the young woman is married by her siblings, it says that right there in the next Mishnah. So it's what Abelaz ben Yaakov is saying differently. But if they gave a divorce, who also be it says that clearly in the next Mishnah. How can you tell me that that's what Abelaz ben Yaakov is saying? Says the Gemara, that's not a problem. Pirusha kamafar. The Gemara, the next Mishnah, which really is part of this Mishnah, is explaining what Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov said. So let's go to the next Mishnah. Hamamen is the if she turns around to the men that don't live with anymore, who mut, as if they were never retroactively never married. So who mut the bikrev say ha? The he muted is bikrevav. Well, a possible nakuna. They were never married, so everything's kosher. But nasa laget, even though they only married with Rabbanon, if he gave her a divorce, then she's treated like a divorcee. Who also bikrev say ha? The he asura bikrevav. And possible nakuna. All the rules of a divorcee apply here as well. What about Nassau Laget? Let's say he gave her a divorce. We learned before that if a man divorces his wife, he can always take her back if he's not a kohen. But once she married somebody else, he cannot take her back. So here we have an interesting scenario. Nassau Laget, he gave a divorce to this girl. Then he took her back. But me and the boy, the second time around, she walked out. Remember, she's still under 12 years old. She walked. The first time she left him via divorce. The second time she left him via miyun. And so we're going to learn now, because the second time was miyun, the miyun undoes their entire relationship. It undoes also the first divorce as well, as if she was never divorced from this man. Because by doing the miyun the second time, she has shown that she's amaktana. She reminded everybody amaktana. My marriage was never married in the first place. If the marriage was never married in the first place, neither were you married when you were married 3 years ago. So therefore, the divorce that he gave you the last time also doesn't count. And then she married another party. When his Armel and his Gasher became a widow, or she was divorced from the party number 2. Now, luckily, she couldn't go back to the first husband, but here she can. Muteres Lachla, she can go back to the first husband. Why? Because the miyun that she did the second time completely severs any ties that she had with the first husband from the beginning. So therefore, if she married the second guy, it's like as if she was never married to the first guy. So now she can go back to the first guy, even though it was a divorce involved, because the second time from that guy was a miyun. Because she reveals everybody I'm a Tana, and we were never married in the first place. And so in other words, the miyun, the second miyun, cancels the divorce that he gave her the first time. What about the other way around? She was married to the guy who was married to Ruvain and me and the boy. First thing she walked out. Then he coaxed her back, and she married the second time. But this time, not again. This time he didn't get on well. He gave her a divorce. So the second time was a divorce. And then Benisas La'ach, then she married another person, Shimon. And then she became a widow or a divorce. Then after that, she cannot go back to Ruvain because she's a divorcee. The Rabbonat, she's a divorcee, and she married somebody else. You cannot go back to your first husband because the second, when the last relationship you had with your first husband, even though your tana was through a get. And this is the general rule. No matter how many times it happened. Get achamiyun, that if the last thing you did with this person was a divorce, you can never take it back again if she married somebody else. Miyun achaget. But if, let's say, the last thing you did was miyun, then the miyun is retrospective and it knows it cancels all the git that were given before because you're demanding everybody that my relationship with this person, I was only a tana, it's not really a relationship. Muteres lachla, and then she married somebody else, and then divorced, she can come back to the first person. How amen is beish. Let's say she was mimayin by a person, so let's say she was mimayin to Reuben. Then she married Shimon. The Gershon, then she was divorced from Shimon. La'achar mina by la'achar the Gershon. So what happened was she was married to one guy, and then she was married, let's say, to Reuben, and then she was mimayin. Then she got married to Shimon, and she was divorced from Shimon. And then she got married to Levi, and she did miyun. And then she did divorce. Went on and on and on. One miyun, one get. She had a whole series. She was a serial married type of person. So what happens? The rules as follows: which husbands can she go back? Then she married somebody and get divorced. Which husband? And she got divorced or became a widow. Which original husbands can she go back to? Is any of those husbands that she left them with a divorce, she's treated like a divorcee, and she married somebody else, she can never go back to the first one. The mean, if any of those husbands, let's say 1, 3, 5 were me and 2 and 4 were get, 2 and 4 she cannot go back to if she married somebody number 6 and then got divorced there, but she could go back to 1, 3, 5. Although she did me and 2, she can go back to. Muteres lachla, she can go back. Okay, says the Gemara, an interesting life this woman had. Says the Gemara, Alma, what does even all this? Osi mean, and the mean comes along, will get that if the second time she had a relationship with her husband, Reuben, was through, and she ended it with miyun, then it undoes the get. So now I'm going to ask a question. Gemara does not understand. Is there a difference whether the same husband you did first a get and then you did a mian, or with one man, at the end of the Mishnah, with Reuben you did a get, with Shimon you did mian. Why shouldn't the mian of Shimon also undo the get to Reuben? Because when you stand there and you do mian, you're declaring to the whole world, I'm a tana, my marriage is no mian thing. So what's the difference if it's to the same husband, where we say the mian, second relationship is end of mian, it cancels the first relationship, or if it's two different men and the mian of the second one does not cancel the get relationship, it doesn't make sense. Why should there be a difference? So the Gemara, and so the beginning Mishnah tells us that mian cancel the get. But I have a question. It says Hamam enes beish. She married somebody else. Then she divorced the other person, the me and a boy. And then she did me with another person, the girsha, and then got divorced. That club. What does the Mishnah conclude? Kol she get all those people that she ended with a divorce. She's divorcee. Can't go back to asura la'asalai. Now, the mian and all those men that she ended with a mian, now, if the last person she left was with a mian, why can't you go back to all of these men? The mian should annul, should cancel all these divorces because she's not declared to the world, I am a tana, my marriages were never serious. Alma, what do you see from the end of the Mishnah? A mian cannot cancel a get. So why, if it's within the same person, it does? What's going on here? Tavra, you are right. It's a good question. Some say Tavra means you're right, MS. Some say Tavra means break it. There's no, it's broken. Misha Shanazul, you're right. The Mishnah has two different authors. The beginning of the Mishnah holds that me and cancel the get, and the end of the Mishnah holds me does not cancel the get. However, Rabbi is trying to get an answer. Rabbi says, on the contrary, Rabbi umay kushi, or Rabbi, what is the question? I don't understand the question. Why can't you see a difference between two men and the same man? Dilma, me and the day, Mavach get the day, which within the same man, the second relationship ends with me and it cancels the divorce. But me and the Chabre, let me about give the day. But if let's say there's Reuben and Shimon, and she got a divorce from Reuben, and then she got a me and she did a me to Shimon, Shimon's does not reflect on Reuben. So why should it be different in logic? If the whole idea of me and it is declaring to the world, I'm a Ketana, and therefore whatever I did doesn't matter. So what's the difference in the same man to the men? Why shouldn't that work? The Gemara explains as follows. The Gemara explains, no, there is a difference between the same man or not. And it goes as follows. The reason why, if it's the same man and the last severance was through a get, we told him she can never go back to him. You know why? Because what does a get mean? A get means that she really loves the guy. She wants to stay on, but he decided to divorce her. So if he, let's say, later on in life, goes back and shows her that he's prepared to take her back, she might want to go back because she left reluctantly. She actually wanted to stay on. So therefore, in this case, we're a unilateral divorce. So we're scared that if the husband then regrets that he divorced her, he's not going to be open and say to her, leave your second husband and come back to me. But he might hint to her somehow or another, signs of affection. And she will take it that he's ready to take me back, and she'll leave the second husband. We don't want to encourage her to leave the second husband through me, because it's so easy to leave. And therefore, we said to the man, if you're going to give a divorce, it's your decision, but if she marries anybody else, that's chafal. So therefore, that only makes sense to the same husband. I need the maket has been emotional because they were intimate together. So she knows all of it, understands all of his movements, which we were watching and monitoring, and will never understand at all. Ozol Mishabish, he will go and ruin her second marriage. Right? She might be happily married to the second guy, the young kid, but if he shows her, curries her favor, and therefore he's going to take her back and ruin the second marriage. So that's why we say after divorce, we tell the man, if you're going to divorce her and if she marries anybody else, you cannot take her back. So think twice before you divorce her. So I'm going to ask the question, so why can't you use the same logic? Even if she walks out, we should say, once this is over, you cannot take her back if she marries anybody else, because otherwise she's going to try to encourage her to come back. What's the difference if it ended through a get or ended through a mean? The idea of they'll do the same thing, curry a favor, she'll walk out of second marriage. What's the difference if it ended the marriage through get or ended through and you're worried that he might try to take her back and convince her to come back, or if it ended through a mean? So there's a big difference. The Gemara says, no, big difference. When it's a get, that means that a unilateral get. That means she doesn't necessarily want to leave him. he decided he doesn't want it, he wants to end it. So therefore, there's a possibility that he'll want to take her back, and she'll be happy to go back. However, if it's what do you call, if she walked out, that means it was her decision to walk out, and he definitely tried to convince her to stay on. And yet, because as we learned before, he invested all this time and effort and everything else to make her go this relationship. But she nevertheless wasn't deterred by that, and she walked out. So there's no reason to say that if she married somebody else and she's happy, somehow or another we'll be able to convince her to come back home. Doesn't make sense. So therefore, after me, and we're not worried if he takes her back, because it must be it's nothing to do with his currying her favor. He's not the one who's ruining her second marriage. Obviously, it didn't work out. But if it was a get, it's possible, and she didn't want to get divorced, and it's possible that he could take her back. So the Gemara says, okay, so what's bothering Rava? Now it makes sense. There's a big difference between somebody else. Eli Kasha. So you're right. What's bothering Rava is not the difference. Why should be a difference between the same man, two relationships, and two different men? Very, very, very understandable. Because with the same man, he knows her very intimately, and therefore there's a possibility he'll ruin the second marriage. When it comes to different men, every stranger is a new stranger. The next person he married doesn't know any of these things. He couldn't curry her favor and so on. Doesn't have that kind of relation with her. So therefore, we're not worried. So what's bothering Rava? Rava is bothering. Why are you asking the question in the first place? Eli Kasha, what's bothering Rava is, on your question is the Chavre is bothering him. One friend on another, Kasha, me and a boy, if he was memayin on her, they had to zira, right? So let's say he was. So this is what bothers Rava regarding the stira in the Mishnah. So there's no problem in the Mishnah between the same guy starting with first with me and then a get, or it's two different people and me and a get. We can understand the difference between why the Chachamim were very worried about the same person. And if the last thing was the get, we tell them no more. You cannot take it back if she marries anybody else. We don't want him to ruin somebody else's marriage. However, what is bothering us is the Chavre Kasha. From one person to another person, that does bother me. And that is why, by one, we said before that if, let's say, Reuven was through divorce, and what do you call it? And Shimon was through a min, and so on and so forth. That let's say if she did min and Shimon has no bearing and no reflection on the get that she has with Reuven, that still stands. And now that she married Shimon, she cannot go back to Reuven. But it says in the Mishnah, me and a boy, the same man, if he, let's say, is a man, that person, and then, he took it back. And then he ended with a get, and then he married somebody else. It says in the Mishnah that, okay, let's go back to the case of number one. In the Mishnah, it says that Reuven, divorced her, took her back. Second time was Miyun, and then she married somebody else and got divorced or became a widow. She could go back to Reuven, right? Because she ended her relationship with Reuven through me as if they were married. I'll tell you what my problem is, says the Gemara. It says in the Mishnah the only reason why she could go back is because she was divorced or widowed from person number two. What happens if it would have done a Miyun from person number two? So the Gemara, I'm sorry, because it says only because of divorce. Eli kasha the chavre ad the chavre kasha. What happens? Me and a boy. She was a mayim with the first guy, and took her back. Nasan get, and the second time, Reuven was a get. Then Venisa, okay, we said the second time was with a get. She cannot go back to Reuven. And why? Venisa's lacha, she married somebody else when his amal is garshin, was widowed or divorced. Asura lacha, she can no longer go back to Reuven because the last ending of separate relation was through a get. So she's a divorcee, and therefore, if she lived with somebody else, she can't go back. And it seems the only reason why she can't go back after she lived with Shimon is because she was divorced from Shimon or she was widowed. Time is Amagashi. But what happened to the second husband? She was a Mayan. She walked out on Shimon as if she was never married. Sounds like Muteres Lachzla. Sounds like that what? What happens if she walked out on Shimon? Then she could go back to Reuven, even though from Reuven it ended with a divorce. She could go back because as if she was never married to anybody, but it's a second person. So, Alma, what do we see from here? Me and the Chavre. So we see from here what? That by her giving me to Shimon, even though she was divorced from Reuven, she could go back to Reuven. So it seems that the mian from one person does cancel the get of another person. Also, mian the Chavre comes the mian from Shimon, the one that she walked out on, and she now can go back to Reuven, even though she ended her relationship with Reuven with a divorce. Get to the day. And yet the end of the Mishnah clearly said that if one man she was divorced from, the second man she only did mian from, and the third man she was divorced, the fourth man she did mian, she can only go back to the person that she did mian. She cannot go back to the person she did divorce. So now I have a problem. What's the difference? But I mean, she was in mind by Ruben, and then she married Shimon, Vigisha, and then she divorced Shimon. And then she married Levi, and there was a Mian, and the rule is she can go back to Ruben, she's a Mian, she cannot go back to Shimon, and she's divorced. What's the difference? That cloud. Kosher gentlemen we get and ones to get it can't go back to. And the Mian will tell Lachloy. I'll know what is she from here. Loy Osi Mian the Chad about to get the days. Clearly the second part of the Mishnah that Mian with one person has no bearing on the other person. And yet the first part of the Mishnah says that with her own husband, if the second time she left the husband was through a get, and then she married somebody else, only if she was widowed from that somebody else can she go back to her husband. But if she did a mean on the second person, she can go back to her husband. Then that was the mean cancels the get that the first husband gave. What's going on here? Amar Blazer, Tavla, you are right. Misha Shanazu, Shanazu. Can't be the same offer. This is what we answered before. Ula says, I'll tell you what happened. He going, for example, that actually the Mishnah's case is talking about 3 times. She was 3 times married to the same guy with Git. What do you mean? And the fact that she was married 3 times, the fact that she married 3 times and she ended up being divorced 3 times, she's now behaving like an adult. That's why she cannot go back to anyone. That the mean, no, the end of the Mishnah is talking about, not that the Mishnah didn't go through ad infinitum. The Mishnah gave you 3 examples, 2 with get and 1 with mean, but actually there were 3 with get. And that's why the mean does not cancel the get. Why not? Because now that she was divorced 3 times, she became a serial divorcee. She now looks like an adult woman, because such a short life to have 3 divorces is, is hard to comprehend. So people assume that she's an adult already and she had a number of, whatever, it didn't work out. So therefore, because she is behaving like an adult, that is why we're going to say that the mian from later will have no bearing on all those divorces. But if it was only twice, then yes, the beginning of the Mishnah said clearly the mian of one man will undo the divorce of the other one. So it's talking about there were 3 gittin. The mechzer kigdoila, she's behaving like a gdoila. But if only the twice, the mian of the friend will cancel it. So who's the one who said before that the Mishnah is 2 different authors? I'll tell you. It says in the pasuk, "Meimenu b'keser shasinu," that we drank the water with money, and eitzenu our wood b'mechiya, but we had to buy. And we're going to use this as an allegory that my and so on. So this is what happened. What's the pasuk talking about? It's Yirmiyah and Eicha is telling us about the future, how terrible things are. B'shas hasakana, when there's a time of danger, and no one's allowed to study Torah. Remember that we learned before the Akiva was incarcerated, before he was killed. The b'shas hasakana is baksha halacha zu. The following question came up in yeshiva, and they had to sort it out. And like we learned last time, there were all kinds of ruses of how to get information out of Rabbi Akiva. Their trickery. They maybe were peddlers, and in their mantra they would throw in the question as well with 1 or 2 words. Rabbi Akiva obviously answered them back in 1 or 2 words, and they were able to understand. So they asked in the following halach: how did she yotze medishim beget? What happened? She left the first husband to divorce, and the second husband went to mian. The question is, if it was mean for the second guy, does the mean cancel the get and she can go back to the first husband or not? So we had 2 answers. One says Tavra Misha Shanazu Shanazu. The Mishnah ends that the mean of one person has no bearing to get to another person. So according to that part of the Mishnah, according to Abelazar says that 2 different tanoim, that part of the Mishnah holds that no, she cannot go back to the first husband. But the first part of the Mishnah says the only time she cannot go back to the first husband is if she was widowed or divorced from the second husband. As if she did mean, she could go back. The mean of the second husband cancels the get of the first husband. So they want to know which is the halacha like. So they asked her, can you go back or not? But how no rabbis can get even closer to prison. There was a time they couldn't get close because I guess the government authorities realized what's going on. Kiva still disseminating Torah. So they hired a person, paid him an absolute fortune, 400 zuz, and he was risking his life going near the jail and to discuss Torah. And the Shaul Rabbi Kiva made a soon. They asked him to keep in jail. What do you think? He says, no. He says, in other words, he holds like the second part of the Mishnah that the mean of one person has no bearing on the get of another person. So clearly, he's a Tana that argues with the first part of the Mishnah, and he holds that the mean of the second person does not cancel the first part. The Shaul then went and asked, he lived in the Tzivin, and he also banned it. Nah, I don't believe this was ever a question, because definitely you're allowed to. Why? This woman lived with a man, this girl, 9-year-old girl, as if she was a married woman. right? And normally a married woman cannot live with any other men, and you need a divorce. And yet you said no divorce. Mean is enough. That means that what are you saying? There's no marriage. So and a married woman having living with another man is chorus, and yet you're saying there's no chorus, there's nothing. So madach isa chorus itarto the isa lava koshke, the whole isa of a husband who was married, divorced his wife, and she married somebody else. For him to take it back is only a lav. Are you going to tell me that lav still stays in place? She could just walk out her husband, marry anybody she wants, no problem. And there's an isa chorus involved. Yet there's no problem. She was never really married. No, and yet the isa of taking back your wife is a problem. Doesn't make sense. So therefore, he says, he says that everyone agrees, like the first part of the Mishnah, that if you walked out of the second husband, she can go right back to the first husband. But in fact, I believe Kach this was a discussion. So these are the two tonight. According to the one that says that Tavra Mikshel that the two parts of the Mishnah are arguing was basically according to this version of the events versus Rabbi Yossi. According to Rabbi Yossi, what was actually the question that asked Rabbi Akiva? Kach shalu. In fact, this is the question that asked Rabbi Akiva. So let's say you're the brother of your mother, the brother of your father's wife is also to your ma'atayda. The brother of your mother's wife is only also Rabbanon Shnias. The Chachamim said, so it's your aunt. People don't understand the difference whether it's your father's brother's wife or your mother's brother's wife. So therefore, it's also Rabbanon. It's called Shnias, secondary or second radius. So what happened was, to use only a shnia, it's only us with Rabbanon. You had a brother from a different father, no relation to his mother, and she ended up marrying your paternal brother, which means she's allowed to, because she's not related at all to your paternal brother. What happened was, your paternal brother died, so now you have a mitzvah of yibum to marry your paternal brother's wife, but there's an isa de Rabbanon because it's your aunt. Does the mitzvah asay of yibum ha'torah push away the isa Rabbanon of shnias? Now, what do we do? Ma'ush temoy. This woman here, what happened was that she was married to your uncle, then she ended up marrying to your to your brother-in-law. She's still under bas mitzvah. Can she, to your brother, can she now do miyun on your uncle? So as if she was never married to your mother's brother. She was never married, even though your mother's brother died already. So what happened when your mother brother died? She was only underage. She was married, then he died. Married your brother, paternal brother. Now he died, which almost makes her a katlanis. According to Rebbe, anyhow, married. And here's an interesting question they just talk about because it's twice now. Your uncle died when she was married to him, and now he died. Your brother, the katlanis, was the mitzvah of yibum, even come into favor. Yet the Gemara is discussing yibum. So maybe we're talking according to Gamliel says you need 3 times before you establish a katlanis. So the question is, do we encourage her to go to mimayin on her dead husband, which is your uncle? So if she's never married, she's not your auntie, and now you can do the mitzvah of yibum. Ma'usha Timoin Hashta, can she now go ahead and say my first marriage I was never your uncle's wife, so therefore even though he's dead already, and therefore I will remove the Isser. My first Nisuin, and the question is, Yesh Min La'acha Mitzvah Eloi. Can you do mean after the husband's dead already? We know that you can do mean while the husband wants. You do mean after the husband is dead. We actually had a little bit of a discussion about Aisha before. We can do mean for Zika, and the Farshim discuss how this is different. But anyway, can you do mean there or not? So they didn't know the case what should be. So because the whole Isa the Rabbanon, the question is, can you do mean achmisa? If to be an Isa the Raisa, for example, your maternal brother's wife. And should she do mean on your maternal brother and then she married your paternal brother? There's no question there because there it's your sister is also matayda. Therefore, we're not going to say do mean achamisa. But the whole Easter Rabban of your aunties, any only also Rabban, maybe we'll say you can do me in here because there's a mitzvah deraisa. Let's do me in here. So they hired in this case here they hired 2 people. I guess it's a much more involved question. They hired 2 people about for $400. A bogus shows up and keep it based on that, so we keep in jail. But us and he banned it. Rabbi Yehuda say that, but it's in Vasa. He said you cannot do miyun after the husband died already. And they both asked it. Rav came along and said that even though one person's miyun does not undo the get of the other person, but And nevertheless, she would tell us, okay, so Reuben gave a get, Shimon gave a mean. We say, okay, Shimon's mean does not help as far as Reuben's get is concerned. That's only as far as Reuben's concerned. But she can marry any one of Reuben's brothers. We don't say, oh, it's your brother's divorced wife. So how can marry your brother's divorced wife? Because she did mean to the second person, she told the whole world that I was never really married to anybody. I was only Tana. So even though as far as Reuben's concerned, we don't want it because we said before we're scared that Reuben will try to break her second marriage. But the brothers who don't really know her, no problem. What do you call it? We must, of course, the reason for the Gzeda why to Reuben she cannot go back doesn't make sense for the brothers. Of course, she's permitted. Who need we're scared that her original husband is going to undo her marriage by hinting to her whatever and all these kind of things. So therefore, we said, you know what? Once it's a get, it's over. But the brothers, there's nothing they have no relationship with her. There's nothing that they can hint, and if they try to break the marriage, we'll stop them. Nay, I would have thought Lisa higher to high. I would have thought that if the get of the first person is a valid get, and then you say to the brother, "No problem, it's not really. She's not the divorced wife of your brother." The whole thing's a joke, and people won't really take it seriously. We're worried that the whole thing will fall apart. We're not worried. Others say just the opposite. She is also to the brothers. We will treat as far as the brothers concerned. She will be considered your brother's ex-wife. Well, in the really, it's not his brother's ex-wife. It's only because of Gzera that he might try to break the marriage. So what about brothers? We're scared the brothers, if we're going to allow the brothers and we'll say she's not really the divorced wife of your brother, then he himself will, who knows, will try to remarry and everything else. So therefore, we decided to leave it at that place. Okay, we'll stop over here.